So, quick update on the pepper seeds. All except for 3 seeds came up, which is a success rate of 90-something%. They're all looking pretty good. Some of them are getting their second leaves now. These 8 here are the saved bird chili seeds. The other are the mixed ones. So I've got all but one of my bird eye chilies, 7 plants, and then all the rest are the mixed ones. But yeah, they're doing good. They could do with just strengthening a little bit, so I might give them a tiny feed. Still too cold to plant them outside, or even think about hardening them off. But that won't be long. Jenny's also growing strawberry spinach and cucamelons, which are those little things. They look like tiny watermelons, but they're just cucumbers. I bought this stovetop cornbread stuffing mix a while back. This is from Sweet Candy For You. I got it. This is made in the United States, I think. It's a Kraft or Heinz product. And I've always wanted to try cornbread stuffing, and this is apparently a reasonably good representation of it, although it is an instant one, so it's, you know, not as good as something you'd make yourself. But so I've got this, and I've got the kind of British equivalent, which is sage and onion stuffing. So this is a bread-based stuffing. This is a cornbread-based stuffing. I'm going to make both, actually, because we've got a big roast dinner with the family. Going to make both today. The sage and onion stuffing mix you make up with water, then form it into balls and roast it in the oven alongside the meat. It seems like this cornbread stuffing, you either use it for stuffing a chicken or something, or you just make it up, and it doesn't actually say anything about baking it after making it in the pan. So I'm going to follow the instructions that are on the box exactly. So we'll have 2 different types of stuffing. We'll have the sage and onion stuffing balls, which I will toast in the oven, and we'll have the cornbread stuffing made fresh and hot just before we serve. So for the sage and onion stuffing, it's just 400 ml of boiling water, and I'll go slightly short of that because it'll be firmer and nicer to form into stuffing balls. And so inside the box it's a bag of what looks like coarse breadcrumbs, pretty much what it is, and then we just dump that into the water. Give it a little mix around just to make sure there's no clumps of dry stuffing in the jug. That's what the instructions say. Looks like soupy nonsense at the moment, but over the next minute or 2 that will swell up and completely solidify. 5 minutes later, and yeah, stuffing is completely solidified, but it's still too hot to handle at the moment, so I'm just going to let that steam and cool down before I try to form it into balls to cook. So this is fully cooled down now. Well, it's down to sort of warm temperature. So now I'm just going to take handfuls of it with clean hands and form it into little things about just a bit bigger than a golf ball. Okay, we got 9, and they're more or less the same size. And then those will just go into an oiled tray in the oven for about 20 minutes, just until they crisp up. Now, whenever I make a product for the first time that is unfamiliar to me, I always follow the instructions exactly. So I've got 1.5 cups of water and 1/4 cup of butter in here. We're going to bring that to the boil, and then we dump in the stuffing mix. In goes the stuffing mix. More volume for less liquid than it was for the sage and onion. Okay, then we turn the heat off, stir it to make sure it's all wet, lid on, and leave. Okay, family dinner, so I shall be brief, but here's the cornbread stuffing. It's quite a different thing to the sage and onion. It's fluffier, I would say, and lighter. Looks pretty good. Let's get some gravy on that. Oh, there's a little bit left. Oh, Eva, shut up. Right, let's give it a try. I know what sage and onion stuffing tastes like, so I'm just going to try a bit of this. Quite a lot more savoury and salty, I would say, than sage and onion stuffing. But for reference, so that's what that looks like. And that's what the cornbread stuffing looks like. So quite different. Both really nice in their own right, actually. So yeah, glad to have tried that. So in summary, we all really enjoyed that. And perhaps a little bit more, I think, than sage and onion, just because it's different, and different is sometimes a lot of fun. I think we all agreed it tasted a little bit over-seasoned, but when it's eaten alongside meat and vegetables, that just means you add a bit less salt to those things on your plate. So I'm sure made from scratch, this is probably an even better thing. So probably at some point in the future, I will make some cornbread, and then I'll make some cornbread stuffing using that cornbread. Just about to open the second jar of my odds and ends pickle that I made back in end of February, was it? So this has had now 2 and a bit months of maturing. Gonna have this with one of my favourite leftover meals, which is cold cuts and chips and baked beans. So we've got some nice leftover cold gammon, oven chips, nice and crispy, and some nice warm baked beans on the side. And so well, it's preserved nicely, it's still good, and that's to be expected. So let's have a little taste of this together with some of this pickle. Nice bit of hot potato, gammon, a little bit of my odds and ends pickle. Yeah, really good. All the flavours have just mellowed and blended and developed. It's just a really tasty pickle. People ask me to compare this to Branston. So it's softer and sweeter than Branston. It's less acidic, but more spicy. So different, same general idea, but different, and I like it more than Branston. So that was the second tasting of odds and ends pickle. We'll get another jar out at some point in the year. I'm saving one for Christmas though. What I'm trying to show you now is something that really can't be photographed or captured on video adequately. This is something I always try to get out and see in person every year, and it's bluebell time in the woods. Now what you're seeing on the camera here is probably a small sprinkling of bluish flowers. In person, the experience is something completely different and quite magical. It's just like a floating sea of blue mist above fresh green leaves. It just can't be photographed properly, so you have to get out here and see it for real. In fact, when I film it out of focus like this, that's a truer impression of what the experience is actually like than if I'd focused it. There's just something about this shade of blue against a green backdrop that kind of can't be seen properly, certainly can't be photographed adequately. And yeah, just something that if you can, get out and see it. Studio Shrimp here, and during the edit I kind of pulled together some ideas about why this is the way it is. Obviously the short version is just that cameras don't work the same way as do human eyes, or rather the human perceptual system. Because it's not just our eyes that we use for seeing, it's our eyes and our brain. Cameras can be very predictable in terms of how they will capture an image. For example, the depth of field for focus can be exactly calculated by knowing the configuration of the lenses and the aperture. The detail present in the image can be anticipated based on the resolution and light sensitivities of the image sensor or film material. Our eyes also have a lens and an aperture and have a light sensitive field at the back, so what's the big difference? Well, one thing is that our eyes don't have a uniform resolution and fidelity across the whole frame, so whereas a camera can snap the whole scene, our eyes are actually darting all over the place, capturing parts of the scene and feeding this information to the brain. Also, the size of the aperture, that is the pupil of our eyes, is largely determined by the available light level, so you can't exactly choose the depth of field and compensate with exposure. So the eye, while it's darting around, is also refocusing on some things in view. It's the brain that has to assemble all these fragments into a coherent view. And it does that in a way that's evolved to be useful to us, prioritising certain kinds of things like potential food or potential threats over other things that are just sort of background. In a way, what your brain is actually making you see is like an impressionist painting of what's actually physically there. So what we see, what we perceive, is rarely a completely faithful representation of what's in front of us. This is why some optical illusions work, and probably also why we can hunt high and low for our car keys, only to find they were in plain sight all along. We just failed to see them. In the particular case of bluebells, there's also the deep purple blue of the flowers, which is right at one end of our visual spectrum. So in a sense, the flowers are sort of on the fringe of perception already. The green, the colour of the background of the leaves and stems, green's right in the middle of our visual spectrum, and we perceive it very sharply and clearly. Also because of the nature of refraction in the lenses of our eyes, which are simpler than the lenses in cameras, both of these colours, that is, wavelengths of light, can't be in perfect focus at the same time. So what you may see when you walk amongst the bluebells is crisp, fresh green leaves with a sort of soft, floating, defocused mass of blue flowers that are striking in the sense that they're obviously present, yet en masse, elusive to sharp view. Now, it's not my intention to ruin a lovely thing by trying to explain it. In fact, quite the contrary. This phenomenon is exactly why I go back out every spring to experience this firsthand. The experience transcends the physical, objective reality. Photos and video can never do it justice. You just have to go and see it. Quick update on the Loquat plant. It's perked up after its long winter sleep. We did lose some leaves off of one twig there, but I think it's going to be okay. So I've given it a good feed and just going to keep it watered now. It's not needing to be covered up at night because we're more or less past the danger of frost now. And yeah, it's doing alright. And finally, a quick update on the Dandelion Mead, or Dandelion Metheglin. It's been fermenting about a week now, still blipping away nicely. I kind of judge the progress of fermentation by timing the interval between these bubbles. And that gives me a rough idea of how fast it's going. So, let's have a go. "12 seconds between bubbles." So that's been going at that rate for about a week now and doesn't really show much sign of slowing down. So I'm going to carry on fermenting it until it slows down to almost a stop, and then we'll make a judgment on what the next thing to do is, which will probably be racking it off to get rid of some of the sediment. You can see all of that murky green colour has dropped out completely. Either the yeast has consumed it or it's just dropped out as sediment. Either way, we've got a nice golden, orange-yellow sort of coloured brew, which I think is going to be fine as soon as it clears. It won't clear at the moment because the yeast is busy in there. A few people said you're supposed to remove the green parts from the dandelions when you make dandelion wine or dandelion mead. They will add a certain amount of bitterness. I don't think that will be excessive, but we'll see. There is a reason why people add hops to beer and use cider apples for making cider, and that's because some of the flavours that you want in your final brew are actually bitter flavours. Maybe I've overdone it by leaving all the green parts on the dandelions, maybe not. We'll just wait and see. But for now, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.